Welcome back to the MOOC course titled Qualitative Research Methods. My name is Aradhna Malik and I teach at the Indian Institute of Technology in Kharagpur, and I'm helping you with this course. And in this course we have been dealing with various paradigms of qualitative research. We have dealt with qualitative research, we've dealt with interpretivism, we have dealt with constructivism, and today we will start with critical theory. We will discuss what critical theory is, how does it act as a foundation for the way we conduct research. Now, paradigms, as was explained to you earlier, are the structures in our minds, the backgrounds from which we approach our research, the mindsets that we bring to our research, and how our research shapes up as a result of these mindsets that we bring to our inquiry. So when we talk about critical theory, critical theory is one such mindset that we bring to the inquiry we conduct in qualitative research. Okay. At the very core, critical theory questions the assumptions that form the basis of truth, meaning, and knowledge. Critical theory. It critiques, it tries to find out how these decisions regarding the most appropriate meaning were made. It questions what the basis was for the arrival at certain meanings, certain interpretations, certain constructions. That is what critical theory at the very core does. That's why it's called critical theory. So we approach a problem with an inherent need to understand why and how relationships that are assumed to be existent, that are assumed to be true, are being assumed to be true. That is an example of critical theory. So, and we'll, this will unfold as we go through this lecture. But when we talk about critical theory, we are trying to find out why we make the decisions that we do regarding the meaning of the phenomena that we inquire into. So we try to gain a thorough understanding of the context that these decisions were made in, and then we question the assumptions that we started out with. So that is what critical theory does. What is critical theory? The aim of critical theory is to challenge currently held beliefs, not for the sake of challenging them, but for the sake of developing a deeper understanding into the phenomena we have always held to be true, or what into the meanings that we have always believed in. Critical theory rejects the idea of a disinterested social scientist and is oriented towards social and individual transformation. So critical theory goes a step further into the process of inquiry, and we were talking about constructivism yesterday. And so in constructivism we say we lay our biases, our assumptions, our backgrounds, our mindsets on the table, and then we say, this is from this perspective I am going to inquire about this problem. And critical theory goes one step further and says we are all enmeshed in a plethora of perspectives. So why are we choosing perspective A? Why not perspective B? That is what critical theory does. So it rejects the idea of a disinterested social scientist. It rejects the idea of a so-called objective interpretation, an interpretation that would be the same irrespective of who interpreted the information that one was analyzing. It rejects the idea of a person, of an inquirer who goes into a situation without being connected to it, and is oriented towards social and individual transformation. The idea behind critical theory is that if we understand the assumptions that we are basing our decisions on, if we gain a thorough knowledge of, or if we are able to capture the essence of the context that we are coming from, we will be able to do something about the situation that we are inquiring into. So the goal is to understand the situation that the inquiry is taking place in, and for the purpose of using this inquiry towards personal and social, or social and individual transformation. That is what critical theory does. We question everything. Why am I going in as a why is my relationship as the observer with the observed A? Why is the relationship not B? That is what critical theory does. Okay, critical inquiry supports a kind of reasoning that is practical, moral, and ethically and politically informed. So we take all perspectives. When we talk about critical theory, we say the phenomenon that is being observed is enmeshed in a practical context, it is enmeshed in a moral context, it is enmeshed in an ethical context, it is enmeshed in a political context, it is enmeshed in a social context, and we try and find out why it is so, and how all of these complexities of interactions between these different contexts are affecting the phenomenon that we are studying. And then after we understand this, we try and we make sense of the phenomenon that we are studying in connection with these intricacies that we are dealing with. Critical theory focuses on in-depth and thorough understanding of the connection between assumptions, description, and explanations. So critical theory tries to understand how our assumptions are tied with our descriptions, and how these assumptions and descriptions and the relationship between these assumptions and descriptions is tied with the explanations that we give and the interpretations that we derive from the phenomena that we are inquiring into. So the focus is on a thorough understanding, is questioning everything with the purpose of understanding or developing a deeper, a more significant, a more robust meaning from the phenomena that one is inquiring into. Okay. Self-reflexivity is another characteristic, or that is another aspect of critical theory. Critical theory must account for its own conditions of possibility and their transformative effect. So there is self-reflexivity. When we talk about critical theory, we are talking about constant feedback from the phenomenon that we are studying, with the purpose of using this feedback from the phenomenon that is being studied to help us clarify or develop a better understanding of the phenomenon that is being studied. So you form an opinion, and then the observed says no, it's not like that, and then you go back, and then so we were discussing something similar, but then in constructivism yesterday. But then when we talk about critical theory, we question the questions that are asked. Why am I asking this question to find out more about this phenomenon? Why not something else? And it is self-reflexive. There is constant modification, constant evolution of our understanding of a particular phenomenon. What does critical theory do? Now here I would like to share with you a 4.5-minute video recorded by Professor Paul Sheehan, who's an associate professor in the Department of English in Macquarie University, Sydney, Australia. I have requested for permission to use this video. I'm still waiting for that permission, but the link is here. I believe the video was recorded about 5 or 6 years ago, and Dr. Sheehan talks about what critical theory is, and he describes it in such a wonderful manner. I did not want to paraphrase it and convey my understanding of his understanding to you. So I'm taking you to the video.
Okay, well, the question as to what critical theory actually is, I think a good way to approach it is by looking at it in comparison to what came before. be it biographical studies of literature. That essentially means you're looking at a text from the point of view that the author, everything that is in the text has been deliberately put there by the author. So if we study the author, if we find out about his or her life, what he or she did, then that will give us clues as to the meaning of the text. It's all about meaning, essentially. Criticism before theory. Now, what theory does is it comes along and says there are a lot of factors that impinge on a text, and there are certain assumptions in place. Pre-theory, criticism is mainly concerned with value, with what's good about this text, why should we be studying it. So value and meaning, I guess, are the two key words there. Theory says there are a lot of assumptions in place before a text even gets written, or assumptions on the part of the people making the judgments that this is a great work or a near great work, and so forth. So theory is more about stepping back from the position of criticism, and it's saying, what are the assumptions in place? How is a text produced? Okay, it comes from an author, but an author doesn't have the final say over the meanings in the text. They can come from a lot of different directions. Theory is really looking at these various other directions. I guess the broad category for that would be context. What is the context whereby a work comes to be produced? So it's looking at things like history, it's looking at often at economic questions. Another big word here is power. One of the criticisms that's always levelled at theory is that theory, postmodernism, whatever you want to call it, doesn't believe in truth, doesn't think there is such a thing as truth. That's a little bit extreme. That's a distortion of what theory is about. Theory is more, it takes the point of view of those who claim to possess the truth. Why are they doing this? What's at stake here? So truth, for a theorist, is always tied in with issues of power. And theory is really about untangling those kinds of issues. What are the power relations here when someone claims to possess the truth? So it's not quite true to say that theory is against truth. It's more against what is being done in the name of truth. It also talks about the difficulty in obtaining truth. In that sense, it's a kind of ongoing criticism of human beings' ability to possess anything absolute. Essences, that's another way of talking about the absolute. What is the absolute essence of something? It's saying these are metaphysical questions that us, as fallible, limited human beings, don't quite have access to. And when we do presume to have knowledge of some kind of absolute, we are effectively taking the place of God. We're assuming a God's eye view of something which we don't have. We only have our various perspectives on things. It doesn't mean the pursuit of truth is not a worthwhile project. Yes, we need to get greater accuracy in our understandings, our knowledge of the world, but we can't assume that we can have access to the mind of God.
Okay, so that was Dr. Paul Sheehan's description of critical theory, what critical theory does. Who is a criticalist? So a criticalist is defined as a researcher or theorist who attempts to use her or his work as a form of social or cultural criticism and who accepts certain basic assumptions. So a criticalist is defined as a researcher, a person who attempts to use her or his work as a form of social or cultural criticism. And attempts to use her work as a form of social, a theorist who attempts to use her or his work as a form of social or cultural criticism, and who accepts certain basic assumptions. And the assumptions that a criticalist works under are, first, that all thought is fundamentally mediated by power relations that are social and historically constituted. So when we talk about what a criticalist inquires into, the criticalist assumes that power relations will exist in the phenomenon that is being observed, that the phenomenon that is being observed will have a historical background, will be enmeshed, will be entrenched in power relations that have been constructed historically and socially. The second assumption here is that facts can never be isolated from the domain of values or removed from some form of ideological inscription. And when we talk about pure science, when we talk about objectivity in research, we say no, everything should be looked at from a very distant perspective. We need to see phenomena as they occur. There are variables that we can control. There are so there are independent variables, there are dependent variables that are influenced by other aspects in the environment, and there are things that can and cannot be controlled. But then when we talk about critical theory, we are talking about accepting that the phenomenon that is being inquired into, or the object of inquiry, cannot be separated, cannot be distanced, cannot be divorced from its historical social background, cannot be studied as distanced or as separate from the power relations that it is a part of. So there are some power relations playing a part in the existence of the phenomenon. They are constantly shaping the phenomenon or the object of inquiry, and that is taken as a given. Then that facts can then we were talking about facts can never be isolated from the domain of values or removed from some form of ideological inscription. So phenomena occur in a they occur within a realm of values, within a realm of ideology. They occur as part of a social milieu that defines what is and what should be done, and what is ideal and what is good and what is right. And within these different influences, phenomena take place, and critical theory accepts these relationships with all of these phenomena in the environment of the observed. That the relationship between concept and object and between signifier and signified is never stable or fixed, and is often mediated by the social relations of the capitalist production and consumption. So the critical theorist also assumes that the observer and observed are not disconnected, and the relationship between the observer and observed is constantly evolving, even when the observer is being observed when the observed is being observed by the observer. The relationship between the two is constantly changing, and the change in this relationship is, one, a result of the observer's position as an observer, and two, it is also a result of the social relations that are mediated, the social relations that exist in that situation. Okay. Then another assumption here is that language is central to the formation of subjectivity, conscious and unconscious awareness. Language, without words we cannot understand what is going on. So words play a very, very significant role in this observer observed relationship, and also in the way the assumptions are formed, in the way the relationships between the observer and observed are studied in the way inquiry is conducted. So it is central to the formation of conscious and unconscious subjectivity. How we perceive things is dependent on the language we use to form the schema in our minds. So to form the schema in our brains, we need language, we have representations, and language plays a very, very important role in helping us understand, form mental pictures, form mental representations of whatever we inquire into. Okay, so the formation and the way person A forms a picture of what is of the observed or what is being inquired into will be different from the way person B forms that picture, and these two pictures will be contingent upon the language that is being used to form these. I mean, I'm using the word picture quite loosely here. We are not talking about images, we are talking more about perceived concepts in the mind, and these perceived concepts, our whatever we grasp, the meanings that we draw from the situations that we study, and they are contingent upon the words that we use to define these, or the words that we use to understand these meanings and store them in our repertoires. Okay, the next assumption is that certain groups in any society are privileged over others, and although the reasons for this privileging may vary widely, the oppression that characterizes contemporary societies is most forcefully reproduced when subordinates accept their social status as natural, necessary, or inevitable. So the power relations, the positions one acquires within a context are also assumed by the critical researcher, and the critical researcher assumes that whenever a slice of the society is being inquired into, there will be some sections of the society that are privileged, and there will be some sections of the society that are not so privileged, that are being that are subordinate to the privileged groups. And this subordination or superordination are given in a social situation. They are natural, and they are necessary, and they are inevitable. They will be found, and the phenomena that are taking place, that we are inquiring into as social researchers, as qualitative researchers, will have to be conducted or will have to be studied. The phenomena will have to be studied, knowing that these power relationships exist. Then that oppression has many faces, and that focusing on only one at the expense of others often eludes, it shouldn't be elides, I'm sorry for the spelling mistake, often eludes the interconnections among them. I'm sorry, it should be elicits, not elides. I have made a mistake here. That oppression has many faces, and that focusing on only one at the expense of others often elicits the interconnections among them. So when we focus on when oppression exists in society, and when we focus on one aspect of this oppression at the expense of the oppressed, then that elicits or that brings out the interconnections between the oppressor and the oppressed, or the aspects of the phenomena that are being studied that seem to be more important, or that seem to be overpowering the ones that are not being focused on. And these relationships come to the fore only when we are not paying equal attention to all aspects of the inquiry that we are conducting. That mainstream research practices are generally almost most often unwittingly implicated in the reproduction of systems of class, race, and gender oppression, and that the research practices are also to a great extent influenced by these systems, these social systems of race, class and oppression. So when we talk about critical theory, we take all these factors into account, and these are the assumptions that criticalists make. Now, what is the difference between critical researchers and traditional researchers? Traditional researchers cling to the guardrail of neutrality. Traditional researchers say that we are neutral, we are studying a phenomenon the way it is happening, we are studying a phenomenon from an objective perspective. So we are neutral, we are not biased, we are not bringing our own feelings, our own mindsets into the inquiry. Critical researchers frequently announce their partisanship in the struggle for a better world. Critical researchers say we are human beings, we will have assumptions, we are going to be rooted in social, historical, political, economic, emotional contexts, and this is what we are bringing to the table. Within these contexts, we are still conducting an inquiry. These contexts are likely to influence what we are doing, but still whatever we are doing will lead to a better world. So that is the difference. Critical researchers say we are going to question the assumptions in order to help in order to facilitate the production of systems or the creation of structures that will eventually benefit the world that they are occurring in. Traditional researchers see their task as description, interpretation or reanimation of a slice of reality, whereas critical researchers often regard their work as a first step towards the forms of political action that can redress the injustices found in the field site or constructed in the very act of research itself. So traditional researchers say that we are going to describe, we are going to interpret, we are going to reproduce, recreate a slice of life as we see it in an attempt to understand what is going on. And critical researchers say we will do something about whatever we are seeing. We want to know why whatever we are seeing is the way it is, and we would like to take a step further and try and find out what is it that we can do to make the situation better, that can address injustices, that can make the situation that we are studying better. Okay. Critical researchers enter into an investigation with their assumptions on the table. So no one is confused concerning the epistemological and political baggage they bring with them to the research site. Critical researchers say, this is who we are, this is where we are coming from, this is what is influencing us, this is what we are assuming. Within all of this, we are going to study whatever we are studying, and we will explain whatever we are studying in light of whatever baggage we are bringing to the table. Okay. Critical research is characterized by, or critical theory is characterized by the ability to challenge assumptions and reflexively adjust these assumptions based on their contextual fit. So when we inquire from the paradigm of critical theory, we assume that we develop an ability to challenge the assumptions and reflexively adjust these assumptions based on how they fit into the context that is being studied. Critical researchers maintain that the meaning of any experience will depend on the struggle over the interpretation and definition of that experience. So this is the last point here, where critical researchers accept that the meaning that is drawn from an experience is going to depend on how the meaning was interpreted, what confounding factors there were while this meaning was being interpreted, what was giving shape to this meaning, and the definition of the experience that led to the interpretation of this meaning. So it's everything surrounding the understanding of a particular phenomenon. That is what critical research is, and that is what critical researchers do. That is all we have time for in this lecture. We'll continue with some more inputs on critical theory in the next lecture. Thank you very much for listening.